Hi, I'm Heatful Dave,
And Lance G.
and you are listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZWLP Conroe.
and 106.1 KZCCLP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Join with us. We're going to have a good time. Peace.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Weekly Business Hour. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we literally have a jam-packed show, so I'm not going to delay any longer. The show today is predominantly about education. Hopefully you'll be able to pick up some tips and ideas that you literally can put in place in your business today in the coming weeks and make a real difference in the performance of your business. First, we have Mr. Mark Miller. Mark is a longtime friend of the show. He has been on the show. He is Mr. Sales out there in the real world. He's one of the leading proponents and experts in the field of sales, and I mean all aspects of sales. Sales, hiring salespeople, putting sales teams together, managing salespeople. All of us that own a business can benefit from Mark, and he's going to talk to us, kind of a refresher, if you will, on sales now that we're midway through the year. So I encourage you, listen to the conversation that we had with Mark. And then our friend Dr. Patrick Woke is going to be back with his Heart of the Hustle, an interview with another leading entrepreneur, business person here in the greater Houston area, whose story is compelling, whose do's and don'ts, again, educational. I think that will help you, help all of us who pay attention, how to build better, more successful businesses. By the way, the show is live on Facebook Live. So you just go to the Facebook page, The Weekly Business Hour, and then you click on live and you can watch as well as listen to the program. And again, as always, if you have a comment or if you have a question about your own business, send them to me. I love to get those questions. It's real simple. Send them to my personal email. It's bestconsult@gmail.com. That's bestconsult@gmail.com. I love to get those emails, and we even talk about some of them from time to time. We have time for a mailbag segment here on the program. So at this point, it gets real easy. Just sit back and listen to a conversation we had very recently with Mr. Mark Miller, known as Mr. Sales, about building a stronger sales effort for your business. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we have been doing for the last few weeks, we're out and about, and today we've stopped in to see a really good friend of the show, Mr. Mark Miller. Back on this show, he's known as Mr. Sales. He's the guy you go to whenever you need to find information out about how to improve your selling process, how to hire salespeople, how to manage them, everything related to sales in your business. Mark is one of the leading experts in this country, particularly when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses. Well, Mark, how are you today?
I'm great, Rick. Thanks for having me back.
Well, thank you for taking time. I'm glad we caught you in your office. Today, understand you're going to offer us a sales refresher course, which is great. Middle of the summertime to kind of tighten things up. Got about 6 months left to go in the year. So let's kick it off and let you help us check off all the boxes we need to refresh our sales.
Okay, and Rick, it's I was traveling last week. Everybody's back out. The planes are full. The airplane's full. There's no rental cars, so everybody's going and doing. And it's time for you to kick off your, if you haven't already, your sales efforts for 2021. And there's a few things. We're going to talk to everybody today, right? So there may be some elementary things that people will hear and say, "Well, I already know that." Well, fine, good. And there may be some introductory folks that haven't heard any of this ever before. So we'll try to speak to all audiences, and we'll just apologize up front if we talk over or under your head. How's that?
Well, that's more than reasonable. It's a good thing to do. I think every once in a while we need to go ABC 1, 2, 3 to nothing else to refresh your memory that it might have floated away. So let's kick it off. Let's talk about the word salesman. I like that.
Yeah, one of the things that no one ever told us as business owners, if we're not, actually sales professionals, but if we own a business, you're going to have to sell. There's no way around it, and probably you never thought about that, because I'm guessing if we ask all your listeners if they had a dress-up show and tell when they were in elementary school, nobody put their best suit on and carried in their leather briefcase and said, "I want to be a salesperson when I grow up." So that's the issue that we have to fight. Zig Ziglar said the whole problem with selling is the 6 inches between your ears. So we're going to spend some time on that 6 inches just as a refresher. Whether you like it or not, if you walk in as a salesperson, you have sort of a built-in stigma. So, if you were going to play like an old game of Password or $25,000 Pyramid or any other game where you tried to get someone to say a word by using one-word clues, think to yourself what you might use to say salesperson. And they usually come out to be words like liar, selfish, commission, fast talker, all those sorts of things that none of us really are, but that's what people view salespeople as. Even when I walk in to buy something at the men's store, I always stop by the sport coat rack, just to see what's there. And you wonder who buys those. And, my wife always says, "What's what all the salespeople buy, Mark?" So that's kind of where we are. And it doesn't matter if you're the chief engineer, the IT guy, the CEO, the whoever. As you walk into someone's office to promote your product or service, they view you as a salesman, and you are stamped with that stigma right away. So your first job is to overcome that.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense. And you hit on the points, because what I think a lot of us forget is that when you meet someone, and you're going to talk a little bit about this, and you got that first 10, 20, 30 seconds, whatever, to establish an impression with someone if you meet them for the first time, and even if you've met them before.
Right. Rick, you say 10, it's 5 now. It depends on how you contact them. If you're, number one first contact is your website, people decide within 5 seconds, they'll just click on through it if they don't like it. So it's somewhere between 5 and 15 seconds, depending phone, in person, online. And if you miss that, you're done. So that's another thing you got to keep in your mind, is that not everyone is the same. And that's sort of where we go next. I put up sort of a behavioral model, and I want you to imagine this in your head. There's some people that are task oriented. They're really focused on the task at hand. And some people are more people oriented. They're focused on the folks that are doing the project, the work, whatever. And it really varies in their communication style. The people that are focused on the task, they don't care how hard you try, how far you came, how much trouble it was. They just want the facts, ma'am. Sort of the old, police mystery sort of thing. Just the facts, ma'am. They don't want any embellishments. And if you embellish, then they lose interest in just no time at all, right? And if on the other hand, if they're people oriented, you've got to sort of embellish and ask them how they're doing, and what's new, and you've got to make that decision pretty quickly. So some help for you, if they're brisk in their conversation with you, if you get the yep, nope people, or yeah, that's fine, Mark, what do you got? You can pretty much guess those are task oriented people. So you just need to get right to the point. Glad for your time, sir. Thanks for talking with me. Thanks for inviting me in. Whatever they did, just curious, what's the most important thing we need to get out of the way first, and let them tell you and move on. Now, if you walk in and, someone's desk is a complete mess, if you get to see them, or if they're rambling, they forgot the appointment, they say, they're sort of disorganized maybe, or, they're a little timid when they're speaking with you, maybe they have a soft tone, and you can judge that maybe they're maybe not as outgoing as the average person, then you're going to have to warm those people up. Otherwise, if you just get right into the facts of the matter, you will lose those people because they think that you're not interested in them. So you really have to judge that quickly. And for all you IT people, somehow on your webpage, you have to appeal to both of these folks, right? If there's too much flarp on there, the task-oriented people aren't going to wade through it. And then there's not a little flarp to make the people-oriented people to feel comfortable when they see it. they're not going to go there because they think it's too stark. So those are the two things I think I just want to get out today is the difference between who you're talking about. And it's, if you take a look at this, the majority of the people are people. It's roughly 56%, and it's kind of 44% that are task oriented. So if you have to err, you err with too much. But the other problem is task oriented people tend to be the leaders of organizations, CEOs, presidents, decision makers. So you don't want to err too often.
You present an interesting challenge there, and I really want to make sure people pick up on the point you made a couple of times at least. This starts at your website and how it appears to people and carries throughout. So this is a really important lesson is making it broad enough appeal so you don't lose, in this case, any of the key groups. That's a wonderful thing for folks to great point to make that. And that's something that caused me to do something as well.
Yeah, and along those lines, Rick, too, these days when you're sending email communications, if you have a point you want to get across, put a little video in there, a 5 to 15-second video with the point you want to get across, because that takes care of the people at the bottom. They get to see you and they're a little more comfortable with you and they see how you are. But it's 5 to 30 seconds. It's enough to get the task people, their tidbit of information they want and not be bored. So I think today, all of my old Sandler friends say, put a video if you can in your email communication. So I think that's good advice.
And no doubt about it.
Yep. All right. So with prospecting, and Rick, I know you probably get these questions too. People say, well, I need more business, right? I've got to have more business. And in general, they think if they need more business, they need new clients. Yes. And in some cases that may be absolutely true, but I think one thing that folks don't understand, if you're looking for absolutely new business in whatever product service you have, whether it's air conditioning, professional work, accounting, law work, whatever, if you're just calling or exploring a cold list, the odds of you selling something to one of those people is something like 0.5 to 2%. So it's a huge bunch of work to get that qualified lead that you can sell to, because I'm sure someone out there has already done the math. They say, well, gosh, Mark, if that's 0.5, that means I need to do 200 prospecting events to even be statistically significant. And the answer is yes, that's right. Because all of this prospecting on people you don't know, there's an element of timing in there. And if you happen to contact them when they're not interested at all, even though, let's face it, accounting people, everybody really needs you at some point, either for tax advice, financial advice, something. They need you, and they probably want you, but they don't want you now, right? I mean, it's July, it's over, if you will. Not for you, but for us, it's pretty much over. So we won't be interested in you until maybe April 14th of next year. So it's just a matter of timing. It's nothing about you. People get discouraged. I'm not doing it right. It's more important to do it than to do it right. And, I tell folks when they start, look, something's better than nothing, even if it's not great, okay? Because you have to do the activity if that's really what you want to do. So remember, that cold list is about 0.5 to 2%.
Yeah, and I think the pyramid, which I've seen many variations of this in my career and working with people and even visiting with you earlier in different formats. The idea is also for me is to spend and put your work, your energy, your money where you can do the best. So building the process and systems to decide to higher up to the top portions of the pyramid.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's just so hard. And then people say, well, I get leads, and that might be Rick and I are talking. He says, hey, Mark, I met this guy. You really need to give him a call. His name is Bill Smith, and here's his number. Well, that's good. Rick at least has been thinking of me, and I'm going to call Bill Smith, and Bill may or may not ever remember Rick. Nothing personal, Rick, but whoever it is, and that's something like 10%. I mean, it's a little better, but not much, to be frank, because Bill may just be saying, yeah, Rick, whatever, sure, and Mark, yeah, he's great. So what you really need is some sort of referral, which means that Rick and Bill talk a little bit, and Rick says, look, I can see the problem you have. Let me get Mark on the phone. When's a good time for him to call you? And, maybe it's 10 o'clock on the, 15th. And Rick will call me up and say, look, I was talking to Mr. Smith. He wants you to give him a call at 10 o'clock on the 15th. That then becomes a 25% event because there's some sort of agreement that something's going to take place. Now, please don't be disappointed if Mr. Smith is not there because he's a busy guy and he may or may not have written it on his calendar, okay? But that's much better than just, here's his phone number, all right? And then if we move up, if we can get Rick, Mr. Smith, and me on a Zoom call at a coffee or something where Rick is saying, hey, this is Mark, he's Mr. Sales, or whatever he says about me that I appreciate so very much, then that's a 50% chance because now Mr. Smith has taken his time, Rick has taken his time, I've taken mine, and no one is going to do that if they're not pretty much interested. So that whole timing thing that we talked about earlier has gone away, right? Because now's the time. Because the prospect, in this case, Mr. Smith, has said so by committing to that event. And then the very last thing, and this is, what I get paid a lot of money for, Rick, so this is going out on your show. People should be advertising and listen to your show all the time for a tip like this. But the very best place to look for more business is from your existing clients. They already know you, they know what you do, and I tell everybody my view is that unless you're an undertaker, there's something you can go back and sell them, and maybe even as an undertaker, if they haven't bought the perpetual care, maybe you can get that in later. I don't know. But those people, maybe they need a checkup, they need a parts request, they need a tune-up, they need something that you can offer to them. Or even better, if not only a current client, but someone you lost business to last year for whatever reason. Not the right time. I didn't like your bid. This is the time to call them up and say, hey, man, it's been, pick a time, 3 months, 6 months, a year since we talked. I was thinking about you today. I was concerned how you're doing. How'd you make it through all this pandemic stuff? Have you gone anywhere recently? And oh, by the way, we had a bid out to you for whatever it was. Nothing ever happened. Did you give it to someone else? If so, can you mind sharing with me what we did wrong? And if you haven't given it to someone else, is it time to think about it again? And I promise you, everyone out there, if you do something like that in all the bids, requests, whatever that you've done over the past 12 months, somewhere in there, there's a deal. And that's much easier to get than starting at the bottom.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And, as we wind up this first segment, I have a particular client that I've been working with for a number of years, and he's been a box advisor, and that is primarily what they do. They either, everything's around the client, whether it be a referral, which is further down the pyramid from the client, or to the client. They do nothing for cold calls or leads or something like that. All of their service, all of their customer service, every marketing thing they do relates to taking their client and getting as much business. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand. When you take that approach in a very positive, open way, it enhances the client experience with you. And so you become a client-centric type of company. Anyway, well, end of that first segment, we need to take a quick commercial break here. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll stay around. We're going to take this first commercial break. Then we're going to come back, and we got another 10, 12 minutes, and visit with Mark a little further and continue this sales refresher with Mr. Mark Miller, otherwise known as Mr. Sales. So please stay with me.
Listen in Mondays at noon to hear Conroe news from local nonprofits, businesses, upcoming events, Conroe Park events, news stories, and information that matters to you with your host, Margie Taylor. of Taylorized PR. For more information about being a guest, visit irlonestar.com/Conroe
Vell Institute, a 501c3 nonprofit, began in 2014 with a mission to strengthen the future of veterans through leadership and entrepreneurship training. We've invested over 1,400 hours of training in our veterans while connecting them with community entrepreneurs and leaders. Our mission is to continue investing in our veterans who have given so much for our country. Please join us in our mission by visiting vellinstitute.org. That's VELinstitute.org.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the midst of a conversation with Mark Miller, again known as the salesman of the Weekly Business Hour, because Mark has been so involved in selling, sales management, all aspects. He really is an expert and understands what it takes to put the deal on the paper and get it in your file. Well, Mark, we went to break and we talked about, in this case, the pyramid, talked about the easier approach of the client and getting more business from them. But there's some other things I think are really important. I'm going to talk about things. We currently have a slide up about questions to help find the real issue. To me, this is one of the most important things somebody can do. Just kind of explore this for a moment, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, most of us are all proud about our company's product or service, and we know we have the best widget, service, whatever. But our prospects don't know, and us telling them is probably not going to convince them. So maybe a better way or an easier way. Remember, we talked about, "Gee, sir, glad to see you. Thanks for your time. What is the one thing you want to get into today?" And they will answer it and say, something like, "Hey, the stage is all yours, Mark. You got 10 minutes. Tell me what you got." And then you say, "Hey, man, I've got so many things I can tell you about. I've been in business for X years. Before I waste all your time, tell me the one thing that you might like to hear about when it comes to selling and whatever selling issues are going on." And they'll say, "Well, yeah, you're right. There is ticket. There's always someone that's been with them a long time and for whatever reason is not performing the way they used to, right?" And it's the case in almost every business. And maybe they were there when they started and they just don't know what to do with them. Now, if I can I can jump into my presentation on how to fix non-performing salespeople, right? But that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is ask a simple question like, "Tell me more about that. Who is this person? How long have they been with you? What do you think the issues are?" And then they'll give you some idea, fair, of whatever it is. "Oh, it's Susie. She helped me start the business 20 years ago, blah, blah, blah." Well, fine. We still don't know what the issue is, do we? So we got to say something like, "Can you be more specific?" Maybe even ask for an example of the behavior that the owner's not particularly happy. Because if you'll notice, you're not talking, they are. And really, selling is more about listening. We talked about that 6 inches between your ears. It's more about getting stuff in there so you can ask the right questions and the prospect can tell you in their own words what the issue is. And once they have explained it, right, then you can decide what the next step is. So how long has this been going on, or how long has this been a problem? And if he's already told you 20 years, there's no reason to get into this. You can say, "Wow, 20 years, that's a long time, sir. What have you tried to do about it?" And maybe, they've sent them to the one-day sales training. They've had another person in that, if you're an air conditioning guy, has put some Freon in, but it's still not cooling, whatever it is. And let them tell you what they've already tried, because guess what? You don't want to offer that as a solution, do you? And if that happened to be in the "I can fix your salesperson" pitch, you're done because they already did it and you're out. But you didn't know that, and now you do. So if you're the air conditioning guy, you don't want to talk about Freon right now. Fair? All right. So they're going to tell you what they've tried to do about it. How much you say this issue has cost you, money in actual dollars over the years. And this is where they get, a little bit iffy, because they don't really know. They know it's a lot, And maybe you have to help them. And so, well, what's your average salesperson selling a year? And they say, pick a number, 100,000, so I can do the math in my head. Okay, 100,000. Well, how about this person? Well, they only sell 80. Well, that's 20,000 for 20 years. That sounds like 400,000 to me. Is that fair? And they'll say, gosh, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I guess it is. Well, now you know what sales training costs. Just kidding. But now you know what the financial impact is. And that's fine. But the next question you ask is, how does that affect you, or how does that make you feel? And I know some guys don't like to ask about feelings or talk about feelings, but you might say something, how does that affect you personally? What effect does it have this on you personally? So, well, I worry about it. I stay up at night, and then the final thing is, have you given up trying to deal with a problem? And it's been 20 years, and see what they have to say. And now you've uncovered all the issues. You know how much money it's costing. You know how it affects the owner. And now you just have to figure out how you can smooth this and take that off of their hands. And, you can call it putting a Band-Aid or on the hurt. But fixing the hurt, put the right, cream with the Band-Aid on so it doesn't hurt you. And this is ever so much easier than trying to get your pitch down because you're just having a conversation. So think about it. I'm sure Rick will put these questions somewhere where you can look at them again and use them if you want.
Great question. I encourage our listeners to consider using these or sharing them with your salespeople. And really see the problem you're doing in a very expeditious way as well. So, where do we move from here?
Okay, so here let's talk about a repeatable sales process. This is big money. Now, I'm willing to guess that of our listeners, if I said to them, could you explain your sales process to me, please? They can't, right? They may have a process for everything else. They may have a process for hiring. They may have a process for paying bills. They may have a process for acquisition. They have lots of processes, but I'm guessing they don't have a sales process. I'm just guessing. So you're going to have to build your own. And, there are plenty of those out there. There's a Sandler one that I'm familiar with, Challenger, Value Selling, Miller Hyman. I don't care. Pick one, because the process is better than no process. And you can always work on it. So if you need a consultant, find one that you like and trust and get them to build you a process. Because, if you're sitting back here now and you're saying, yeah, gosh, Mark, I don't have a process. Okay, fine. That's good. Or if you say, yeah, I do have a process, but, we've been using it for the last, pick a number of years, long time, then maybe it's time to just sit down, in a quiet space, give yourself a half a day, get everybody that you think is involved, and let's talk about it for a minute. But, where do your leads come from? How much is a lead worth to you? Okay. What's a value to the organization of one lead? I mean, there's all kinds of examples, but if you know that it takes 4 leads to get an appointment, and then maybe on every 4th appointment you get an offer to present, and you close, pick a number, half the ones you present on, you have 4 and 4, so that's 8, that's 16. And if your average sales price is $16,000, that lead was worth $1,000, right? As you're going back through the math. So if you knew a lead was worth $1,000, how would you treat it? Yeah. Maybe better than you are now. So you have to figure this out, figure out what the leads come from. How does it cost you to get the lead? Yes. And then what is the value? And then you have to have a proven sales process. So you're going to have to come up with that. What you do after you get the lead, how quickly does the lead get followed up, on and on and on. And that sort of process then allows you, once it's written down and followable or practiced, then you can plug people in that can follow a process, and they don't have to be super salespeople. Fair enough. And, if you don't have a contact management system by now, I mean, it is 2021. There are plenty of free ones. Please don't buy Salesforce. It's expensive, and everybody that uses it, it's kind of like Oracle. all the big guys use Oracle, and then they all regret putting it in process because it costs them 3 years of revenue to get it to run. Sorry, Oracle salespeople. But whatever, just get something easy so that you can then put your computer and your technology to work for you. You build a drip marketing list, on and on and on, and leverage that technology because that's your number one salesperson. And that means, if it is technology, that it's your website. So if that website still looks funky and it's not just rife with video content and click here to find out this, you need it redone. And don't get your, cousin's son, daughter, next door neighbor to do it for you. Find someone that knows how to build a website correctly and spend the money. It's well worth it, because that 5 seconds of the people that are looking for you, right, is the most important. I went to a talk and they said that during 2020, 68% of all transactions were done without ever talking to a salesperson, which means they were done online. And, you could go back to your business and see how much comes in online. And if it is 62%, then you must be doing something right. But I'm guessing it's not. So there's some room for improvement there. And then who manages the process? Do you have a sales manager? Yeah. And
Minutes left.
I'm sorry? Yeah, go.
Minutes left. And
How many? Two.
We've got, what would you like to kind of draw this to a conclusion as far as bringing this all together? I love this chart. I've seen this chart before. And it really, if you take the time, people take the time and read through it, and it is very helpful. Very helpful.
Okay, so I've got like 1 more minute, Rick. Is that sort of where we are?
Yeah, about a minute.
Okay, so don't try to train your salespeople. All right, do that last. All right, we'll take that from a sales trainer. I spent 15 years training salespeople. Do that last. What you want to do is build a process, because if you look at a skills distribution, a sort of standard distribution curve, if you remember that from somewhere, I mean 68% of the folks are average. 34 are on the good average, 34 are on the bad average. And that makes your field of potential salespeople very large. Only 13.6 are really good, 13.6, right? So if you have 1,000 salespeople, that means 136 of them out of 1,000, where you have 680 that you might want to be able to put in. And you can put those in if you have a process. The idea of the process is to leverage the events so that you and average salespeople can perform well. So that's the point I want to get across.
You can't say it enough. Sales process is just the critical thing that people have to do. You made it today and emphasizing it, and I encourage people to really put it. Mark, I can't thank you enough. As always, great information. I mean, my head is just exploding. So, you always bring up salient points, things that can make a difference today. That's what the Weekly Business Hour is all about, bringing information that can potentially change business even today. So, if people want to follow up and get in touch with you personally, what's the best way for them to do it?
Okay, best thing, Mark at markmiller.us. That's a really easy email to remember. Again, Mark, M-A-R-K, at markmiller.us. And we're happy to answer any of your questions, provide any of this information, however you'd like it.
Well, again, thanks for being available and inviting us in. Great conversation, and look forward to catching up with you in the near future again.
Great. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation that we had with Mark Miller, Mr. Sales. And I hope, again, that there's some ideas and some tips in that conversation that can help you today or next week in your business. We're going to take our bottom of the hour break. When we come back, as promised at the beginning of the show, we've got Dr. Patrick Woke. He's got another guest in his Heart of the Hustle series. I think you're going to really enjoy this surprise guest and their discussions of how they built a strong, successful business right here in the greater Houston area. So please stick with us. We'll be right back with you.
Hey, this is Wayne Green, your host for Radio Wayne, Spokane More. Each Saturday from 5 to 7 p.m., I'll be playing folk, singer-songwriter, Americana, blues, bluegrass, classic country, Cajun Zydeco, Celtic swing, and whatever else seems to fit. Once again, that's Radio Wayne, Spoke, and More every Saturday from 5 to 7 p.m. on Lone Star Community Radio.
Are you interested in learning more about preparing quick, healthy, and safe meals for your family? Would you like to spend time with others learning tips and tricks, along with practicing and tasting nutritious food? If so, the On the Road to Healthy Living Mobile Cooking School is for you. Call Amy Ressler at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service at 936-539-7825 to find a class near you or volunteer to host a class.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Weekly Business Hour, and we're getting ready to hear another Heart of the Hustle. These are shows that are produced and directed and delivered by Dr. Patrick Woke. He is the director of the School of Entrepreneurship and Capital Preservation at the University of St. Thomas. So great programs, and I hope you'll enjoy his conversation with his special guest. But before we go there, again, I remind you, the show will be produced and released a couple, 3 days from now to be available all over social media. Just go look for the Weekly Business Hour. Go to our website at onebestconsult.com. Go to the station here at the Lone Star Community Radio under the tab of the Weekly Business Hour, and you can find a posting. So if you want to listen to the show in its entirety, want to share it with a friend, really appreciate that, you can find it posted on social media a couple days from now. So thanks so much. Now, let's listen to the conversation that Dr. Woke had in his Heart of the Hustle interview.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Patrick Woke, and we are at Heart of the Hustle here in Houston, Texas. And today we are very lucky to have George Joseph here, CEO of Common Bond, and I call it PRC, or Positive Recovery Centers.
Yes, sir.
And I just want to tell you a little bit about, we're very lucky to have you here, George, and the fact that, you're just recently awarded the Houston Business Journal's Most Admired CEO of the Year. That must be a great acolyte, as well as I heard from you as well as Counselor of the Year. And I think that also goes along with your PRC business. But it's really amazing to have you here at the Heart of the Hustle today. And we really want to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about your businesses, what you're going on. I'm sure almost everyone out there knows Common Bond, but they may not know your other businesses.
Yes.
And I would love to hear about that. And then a little bit about what you're looking forward to the next couple of years.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for being here and doing this for the public and for having me on. I'm very excited to be here. I have two passionate projects. One is Positive Recovery Centers. It's a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center that has inpatient, outpatient, detox, sober living. We're right across the street from one of the facilities is right across the street here from St. Thomas. We had been there originally since 1994. The first company was called The Right Step. I sold it in 2012 and had a 4.5-year hiatus on my non-compete. And then once that was over, we restarted Positive Recovery Center and basically took back some of the facilities that were managed by The Right Step because I was still the landlord. And then we have Common Bond, which is a bakery, bistro, brasserie. It's amazing feel of Europe, very multinational. You could be in the bistro and hear so many different languages being spoken. I just love the name Common Bond is the bringing of people over the joy of food. And it originally opened almost 7 years ago by a chef from Houston who went to New York and trained and then went to Europe and trained and had a vision to bring this back to Houston. And so when he opened it, he didn't have some of the business savvy that a chef sometimes always has. And the kitchen was too small, but he had such great following, lines out the door. And so he sought me out through a mutual friend. And, I didn't plan to be in the bakery business, but sometimes things happen for a reason. And I felt a calling to it. And so I bought it. And obviously with the pandemic, we were right in the middle of our growth strategy. I like to grow things. I like to see employees move up, get promoted, feel good about their job, take ownership. So we're right in the middle of that expansion, and we've gone from basically 1 restaurant to 7, and there's 3 more that are in construction as we speak. And, the staff has done an amazing job through the pandemic. The same thing for Positive Recovery Centers. We follow all the guidelines. We try to do everything as best we can to keep people safe. And, now future is just growth. I think that when you have a good service, it's a disservice to not grow. Now, there are times that it would have been easier to stay 1 location for the rehab, 1 location for the restaurant. It would have been a lot easier to manage. But for me, it's like when you have good employees, you want them to get promoted. You want them to grow. And then when you have a good service, at Common Bond, people drive in from all over the city, but they also come from all over the country, all over the world. Mm. And so for me, it's like, if you love our product, let us expand it, because the lines were out the door. We didn't have enough seats. And so now we're in the Heights. We're going to Spring, which is our first big step to the north part of town. We get emails and inquiries on our website. Please come open in Corpus Christi. Please come to Florida. Please come to Dallas. And we're like, man, we could barely keep track of what's going on in Houston from the restaurant perspective. And then from the rehab perspective, the Right Step was a 20-year love project, and it grew throughout Texas. And when I sold, it was a difficult decision. It was a good decision for me at the time, but it was a difficult decision because you're basically allowing your employees to go work for someone else. And the private equity-backed group, they did some really good things, but they also did some poor things, and it affected the employees. And at the 5th year, they basically went Chapter 11, and I was the landlord. And so, and I was able to take back some of the facilities. A lot of the great staff came aboard with me. And so now we're basically replicating what we did the first time with a new and more exciting curriculum, which is called Positive Recovery Centers. Positive Recovery, which is the curriculum. And that's a great story. Back in the Right Step days, we'd have all employees read 1 book a year. I would pick a book. One year was Who Moved My Cheese. The next year, one of them was Delivering Happiness. And the Delivering Happiness, as you know, is about positive psychology. And Dr. Seligman at University of Penn, and our physician of all people, all employees had to write a report on it. But he, in his report, took it to a whole nother level. He actually researched University of Penn and then signed up for their master's program. So not only was he a medical doctor, he went and get a master's degree in positive psychology. And so when we restarted our addiction program, it's like I wanted that curriculum, I wanted that name, and I wanted him to be our chief medical officer, which his name's Jason Powers. That he is, and that's how it's all come together.
That's a great story. I really appreciate you sharing, and it's really amazing to hear your expansion plans and things that are going on. Let's go back a little bit to the early days, the beginnings. We were talking. You and I chatted a little bit about that. How did George start out? How did you get the entrepreneurial spirit? Where did that come from? And tell us about those early days of what kind of led up to what we're seeing today.
I'm from South Louisiana, but I'm half Lebanese and half Cajun.
Wow.
My grandfather migrated from Lebanon, and he was a merchant. So basically he sold clothes, he sold things. And I'm not exactly sure the great history about how he ended up in South Louisiana, but he did. And he was peddling merchandise, and then his kids, my dad had clothing stores, my uncle had appliance stores, my uncles had clothing stores. And I think I was probably 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. I'm in the clothing stores, straightening up things, sweeping, cleaning things. I remember the first time I could do a sale was a big deal. I was probably 10, 11, 12 years old. I still, in fact, I got to find that. I had a antique cash register back then, those days, in the early 70s. And, I started cutting grass. I was in distributive education in high school, which meant you go to school in the morning, you worked in the afternoon. So I always felt like I had a good work spirit. And then, I got mixed up in drugs and alcohol. My dad died when I was 12. I didn't know how to deal with the grief. So I got mixed up in drugs and alcohol, and the blessing was that my entrepreneurial spirit had me selling drugs. And I got caught, which was the best thing that could have ever happened, and it saved my life, actually. It really did, because it's such a dangerous lifestyle. And my lawyer was so wise in saying you needed to go to rehabilitation, and I had no intention to go to rehabilitation, but I did. And while I was in some of my treatment, the counselors actually talked to me and they said, you might want to become a counselor. You have a way to confront people and they don't get defensive. And so I went back upstairs and told the other guys in the program, I said, man, they're really hard up for help. They think I can become a counselor. And look at the kind of cars they drive. I was 19 years old. So what did I know? And then, when God has a calling for you, it just happens. And so I ended up going, get trained to be a licensed chemical dependency counselor. Was recruited to Texas in 1987 and just have never left. I love Houston. I love the people, the diversity. And, I got the right step because it was basically a bankrupt company. And they came to me and said, hey, we can give you 25% of the company and a small salary, but we're about to go bankrupt. And I'm like, whoa, that sounds very appealing. But I came aboard and turned it around and bought the people out and just grew the business. And I just love helping people. I love seeing people smile. I love people having good service. So that's been my passion.
And I think you hit on some of the things that we see commonly, as an entrepreneur myself, is this. I think, I also like your advice or thought on this is, do you think having a maybe addictive personality or let's call it compulsive personality, is that pretty much par for being an entrepreneur? And also a thing I want to point out is, did those early feelings like loss of your father, spur you to become an entrepreneur, really empower you?
I don't know if that spurred me, but obviously it spurred my addiction, which spurred me to get help, which spurred me to want to help more people. So that part, yes. And I do think entrepreneurs are usually type A, risk takers, want things to be better, always willing to take risk. And sometimes that causes collateral damage. I mean, I've had divorces because of, I think, business getting in the way of the relationship with the wife and thinking that, what's first, the business or the wife or the business. Sometimes that's very confusing when you're worried about payroll or, you got to do things that, it takes 12 hours versus being home at, 8 hours. So I think there's some negativity to entrepreneurship, but with the right guidance, support, leadership, you learn to have balance and have the right culture. And so that's what I'm proud of. And being a member of Entrepreneurs Organization has definitely helped.
Yeah, that was one of the things that enlightened me and really helped my life out is, seeing and sharing with other people. And I think the challenge is, as you pointed out, is that work-life balance is very challenging because we do pour our heart and soul out to the people in our organization, as you pointed out. And then we have to, what do we have for the tank when we go home? And I think when we're younger, we think we can do both. And as you know, it may not always be the truth. What's a golden nugget? I always like to ask my CEOs, my entrepreneurs, what is the golden nugget? If they want to share something out there with the audience out there, the Heart of the Hustle audience, what would you say? Hey, this is some gold for you.
I think it's the two things that have been persistent that I learned early on that always rings true is to make sure you invest enough in human resource, a human resource leader that's compassionate but accountable, holds the employees accountable, and technology. Technology continues to change and continues to improve. However, when people sell you technology, if they don't sell you good training, you may use 2 or 3% of what it's capable of. And that's the biggest frustration as an owner is we want new technology and employees want it too, but if you don't use the full capacity of it, I think you're cheating yourself. So I don't know if that's a good golden nuggets, but those are the two things that have persisted in my life that when I invest in those two areas, life gets easier.
Well, that's very good. And I agree with you. I think there's human resources and being involved in your people. I mean, you definitely demonstrate that as being an admired CEO. Yeah. And I think as well as technology, as an entrepreneur myself, technology, we're all kind of technology geeks. We always want to see the best and the better. Well, I think that we're kind of coming to the end today. Yeah, and I really appreciate you making the time and coming over here to St. Thomas. And George, I'll tell you, you really, through your bistros and especially through Positive Recovery, you make a real huge impact here in the city of Houston. We all owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, how'd you like that conversation that Dr. Woke had? I think it's very interesting to hear the stories of successful entrepreneurs and how they did what they did. Always encourages me to see the kind of results that people can obtain when they put their head down and work at it and work smart. So it's very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Woke, for the Heart of the Hustle. What a great series of interviews with local successful entrepreneurs. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's show. I again thank you for taking time to listen to us. And remember, a replay of the show will be available in a couple days all over social media under the Weekly Business Hour page on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. It's out there. If you missed something, want to re-listen. And remember, these are posted for up to 2 years. So down the road, when you have some time, you want to check on something, because I think there was a great bit of education today that could benefit anyone in their business in the area of sales, and also in the area of encouragement and motivation of building a great business, as Dr. Woke walked us through during his interview today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, next week, encourage you. Please join us live, 11 a.m. every Monday, the Weekly Business Hour. Until then, I encourage you, stay focused on what's important in your business and execute, execute, execute. Thanks so much.